The past few years have proven beyond a doubt that we don't know everything about the world's ancient history. We've uncovered stone calendars, hydraulic systems, and temples built long before mainstream timelines say we even figured out writing. The past not only had engineers, they had astronomers and surgeons. But before I tell you all about that, please help me grow this channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. It keeps content like this coming and also confirms that, well, you have great taste. Alright, let's do this. I'm Mike with List25, and these are 25 archaeological finds that prove ancient civilizations were advanced. 25. The City of Caral. If we're going to think of progress as getting shinier buildings and smarter gadgets, then we're missing something. Caral was built thousands of years ago, but it came with a blueprint for civilization that we're still struggling to match. Every pyramid in the city, and one of them goes up 70 feet, was reinforced from the inside with shikra bags, basically fiber sacks that they filled with stones that acted a bit like shock absorbers during earthquakes. You don't invent something like that overnight. The city's layout followed a deliberate plan. Builders separated the ceremonial areas from the living quarters with incredible harmony. Excavations at the site have also turned up irrigation canals and one of the first ever quipus, which further proves that they could systemize labor, record data and information, and coordinate large-scale projects. 24. The Ljubljana Marshes Wheel. If someone asked you when society started getting advanced, what would your answer be? Was it when people started building houses? When politics took shape? Or do you think it should go back to something as simple as the creation of the wheel? I mean, you can't move large volumes of building materials around without having invented something like that, right? It took archaeologists a while to piece all the evidence together, but we now know that the wheel was invented at pretty much the same time both in Europe and the Near East. Several pictographs from the Iana district in Uruk show wheel vehicles around 3500 to 3350 BCE, and an ancient pot from Poland shows a four-wheeled wagon from more or less the same era. The oldest intact wooden wheel we've ever found actually turned up in Slovenia in the Ljubljana Marshes. It was an ash disc with a square hub locked to an oak axle, and was radiocarbon dated to around 3350 to 3100 BCE. 23. The Uluburun Shipwreck. No, the ship isn't what I'm going to talk about, although it must have been pretty incredible to see it on its own. Divers found the wreck in 1982 off the coast of Uluburun near Kaş in southwest Turkey. Despite its age, it carried a much bigger story. Inside were 10 tons of copper and a ton of tin, enough to make 11 tons of bronze, the high-tech alloy of the ancient world. Modern isotope fingerprinting revealed that most of its tin came from a Hittite-controlled mine in Anatolia, while the rest came from the Musiston mine in Uzbekistan, more than 2,000 miles away. That means that Bronze Age traders had already built a long-distance network stretching across Iran and Mesopotamia, and they knew how to keep the supply chain flowing. 22. Babylonian Tablet YBC 7289. About 3,700 years ago, a student took a lump of clay and made one of the smartest math notes in history. The tablet shows a square with a diagonal drawn through it. Beside the drawing is a number that corresponds to the square root of 2, written in the Babylonian base 60 system. When you convert it to modern numbers, it's correct to 6 decimal places. That's incredibly accurate. But the point I'm trying to make isn't that they were smart. It's that they had a system complete with tables, formulas, and teachers who understood geometry and used it for real-world problems like land surveys and construction. 21. The Great Ziggurat of Ur. The Ziggurat of Ur was built around 2100 BCE. Its builders had to set long, straight baselines and hold right angles over a 64 by 46 meter area. These guys clearly understood loads and staging. A massive mud brick core carried the weight, while fired bricks set in bitumen, or tar, formed a hard weatherproof shell with drains to get rid of rain. That tells us that they also knew how to manage any possible moisture and make a building last in an area that used to be wet, flood-prone, and lined with canals. You see, at the time, Ur was surrounded by marshes and seasonal runoff, so keeping the structure dry was just as important as keeping it upright. Just the fact that they could organize the materials alone, millions of bricks, tons of bitumen, timber for scaffolding, and food for workers, points to exceptional administration and planning skills. 20. The Great Pyramid of Giza. Okay, this one's probably going to get me in some trouble here, but trust me, I am not an ancient aliens devotee. Still, we can't escape facts when it comes to the pyramids of Egypt. Just looking at the Great Pyramid alone, it's easy to see that we're dealing with something that was built on a completely different level. Attributed to Pharaoh Khufu, the builders carved and leveled the limestone bedrock beneath it so precisely that even with today's most modern tools, it's hard to find spots where they went wrong. The sides are almost perfectly aligned to true north, and it contains approximately 2.5 million limestone blocks, all weighing between 2 and 3 tons. In fact, some of the pyramid's granite pieces weigh up to 70 tons and were hauled from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away. According to conventional archaeology, it was completed in about 25 to 27 years, which means placing, cutting, and setting a stone roughly every 5 minutes or so, all without cranes, wheels, or steel tools. Whatever you believe about its purpose, it was clearly built by people who knew exactly what they were doing. 19. Dholavira's Reservoirs. About 5,000 years ago, the builders of Dholavira, now in one of the driest parts of India, took stone and sand and turned the desert into a working water network. They built 16 massive reservoirs and linked them up with channels that carried monsoon rain throughout the city. One of those tanks was over 70 meters, or 76.5 yards long, with steps running down both sides. The whole layout used gravity to move runoff from higher catchment areas down into the reservoirs, then through stone drains that filtered and redistributed it across the settlement. The slopes ensured that the flow was steady, and the channels stopped the water from getting stagnant. And they did all of that in a place where most of us wouldn't have even dreamt of settling. 18. The Code of Ur-Nammu. The Code of Ur-Nammu is the oldest known law code on Earth. Instead of an eye for an eye, it demanded fines and restitution. Murder and theft were capital crimes, but most disputes were settled with silver. It even mentioned standardizing weights and measures, showing a clear grasp of economics. Each case followed an if-then format, the same legal formula still used today, and it was issued roughly 300 years before Hammurabi's better-known code, which borrowed much of the same structure. 17. The Dancing Girl Bronze. Discovered in 1926 at Mohenjo-Daro, the tiny bronze dancing girl looks like she could step off her pedestal at any second. She was cast somewhere between 2700 and 2100 BCE using the lost wax method. Artists would make a wax model, cover it in clay, and then pour the bronze in, so the wax would then melt out. Metallurgical tests have actually shown that the Indus craftsmen mixed copper, tin, and traces of arsenic to harden the metal, proving they already understood alloying, a process that requires perfect timing and temperatures of more than 1,000 degrees. Her stance, one arm bent and chin raised, shows the kind of balance you just don't expect from a 5,000-year-old sculpture. 16. The Chankillo Solar Observatory. You wouldn't expect one of the world's first observatories to be sitting right in the middle of a Peruvian desert, but that's exactly where the Chankillo Observatory is. The people here built 13 towers along a ridge that lined up with the sun's movement, and did it in such a way that you could tell the time of the year just by watching where the sun rose or set between them. It was reliable enough to mark the solstices, the equinoxes, and almost every day in between, and all they had to work with was the horizon. The complex around it had temples and walls, so the site was mapped, planned, and so exact that you can still see the sun rise between the same towers today, just like it did more than 2,000 years ago. 15. Brain surgery. In 2023, archaeologists studying bones from Megiddo, a famous site in Israel, found the skull of a young man who had undergone what might be the earliest known brain surgery in the world. A square piece of bone had been carefully removed from his skull in an effort to save his life using a method called angular notch trephination, something that would have required a great deal of anatomical skill to carry out. Archaeologists could also see that the man didn't survive for a long time after the surgery, and that he was buried beneath the house next to his brother. Both of them showed signs of serious illness, possibly leprosy, which would make this one of the oldest medical cases we have ever discovered. 14. The Cascajal Block. The Cascajal Block was created by the Olmec civilization and has 62 very distinct glyphs. Some look like corn, then we've got pineapples, insects, and fish. Some of the others are more geometric or abstract, if you will. The symbols don't match any other known Mesoamerican writing system, so we know that the Olmec created their very own script. Our best guess is that the glyphs recorded important information like noble titles, deity names, and calendar dates. It predates the Zapotec system by more than 400 years. 13. The Lothal Dockyard. To build a working dockyard 4,000 years ago, you needed builders who understood water levels, tidal flow, and structural balance well enough to design a port that could fill and drain with the river. Lothal's builders also knew how to align walls to control current strength and keep ships from being smashed against the sides. Trade seals from Mesopotamia have also confirmed that Lothal's merchants were doing business overseas. That means they understood navigation and logistics too. Floods and shifting river channels eventually cut it off from the sea, and the once thriving harbor turned into dry land. Even so, the brickwork and drainage systems are still there, but it's mostly ruins and quiet fields now. 12. The Clepsydra of Karnak. One of the oldest water clocks we've ever found came from the Karnak Temple in Egypt. It was made from alabaster and worked by letting water drip through a tiny hole at the bottom. As the water level dropped, carved marks on the inside showed which hour of the night or day it was. The clever part was that each column was spaced differently for the different seasons, so they knew that the nights changed their length depending on the time of the year and adjusted their clock face, so to speak, to match. 11. Stonehenge. Whoever planned Stonehenge understood the workings of the sun and seasons better than most of us. These sarsen stones line up perfectly with the sun's movement. On Midsummer's Day, the sunrise hits just beside the heel stone, and on Midwinter's Day, it sets neatly between the tallest ones. That means these builders tracked solar paths for years before ever lifting a single slab. Farmers needed to know when to plant, when to harvest, and when the darkest days were finally ending, and this monument gave them that. Every angle lines up with the solstices. And if you watch this channel regularly, you'll remember that I talked about Stonehenge just the other day when we discussed how scientists only recently discovered that one or more of the pillars could be made of quartz. That detail could change everything. Quartz naturally catches and reflects light, so when you think about how the stones line up with the rising and setting sun, it suddenly fits. 10. Plimpton Tablet 322. Thanks to Babylonian Tablet YBC 7289, you already know the Greeks only improved some of what they got after the ancient Mesopotamians came up with it. It's the same with the Plimpton Tablet. It's covered in rows of numbers that were written almost 4,000 years ago, and every single line of those numbers works out the sides of a right triangle. Yeah, eat your heart out, Pythagoras. Whoever wrote it clearly knew how to build these right triangle sets on purpose, which probably also tells us that we've always been suckers for punishment. 9. The Sanxingdui Sacred Trees. The Sanxingdui people were masters of bronze. Trust me, Google them. They left incredible artifacts behind. In fact, some of the most spectacular were the bronze sacred trees discovered in their sacrificial pits. These trees rise over 13 feet tall. One measured about 12.9 feet, and have twisting branches, fruit, and even birds on their branches. Recent studies on the trees have shown us that the Sanxingdui made an inner framework for the trees and then used a layered casting process to keep every curve stable while the bronze cooled. They didn't have thermometers or precision tools, but they figured out how to get the bronze to do what they wanted it to, which is pretty amazing if you ask me. 8. The Olmec Colossal Heads. I've already talked about the Olmec's writing system today, but I also have to tell you a bit more about their colossal heads. We've found 17 so far, all placed in ancient ceremonial centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta. Each one sat in a plaza or near a pyramid platform, and since every face is different with its own expression and headdress, we believe they were made to look like their rulers. Some of the heads were buried or moved in ancient times, likely as part of rituals marking the end of a dynasty. We've also moved a few ourselves, well, not list 25, but you know what I mean, in recent times to place them in museums. But even with cranes and trucks, it's still a serious job, which really makes you think about how they managed it over 3,000 years ago in that terrain. 7. The Antikythera Mechanism. You had to know this one was going to be on today's list. First of all, it can be seen in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens today. Still, if you don't have the money to travel, there are multiple reconstructions on display worldwide. So, in short, it modeled the sky. It tracked the sun and the moon, predicted eclipses, and included Metonic and Callippic calendar dials. It also had a games dial for Pan-Hellenic festivals. You turned a side lever that drove gear trains to pointers on the front and rear dials. At least 30 of its gears are preserved, but precision is what makes it extraordinary. Every tooth, pin, and dial was part of a design that predicted cosmic events with the accuracy of a clock. Recent studies in 2024 and 2025 also now suggest that its calendar didn't follow the Egyptian solar year as once thought, but a Greek lunar year of about 354 days. That means that it could be adapted for different calendars. And yes, a new simulation has hinted that the gears might have jammed every now and then, but considering that it spent 2 millennia underwater, that's a pretty generous critique. 6. The Rosetta Stone. Most of us know that the Rosetta Stone is one of the most famous items in the British Museum, or we've at least heard about it. But it's not on today's list because of what it is. It's here because of what it tells us about the people who made it. It was made in 196 BCE and shows the same decree in hieroglyphs, Demotic, and Greek. That means that the ancient Egyptian officials were running a multilingual government that could communicate with priests, citizens, and foreign rulers all at the same time. The decree honored King Ptolemy V, and identical copies were sent to every major temple in Egypt. It would also ultimately help us figure out Egyptian hieroglyphs, something no one had done in more than a millennium. 5. The Liangzhu Jade Cong. If you ever needed proof that patience can outdo technology, just look at the Jade Kongs we've discovered from the Liangzhu culture in China. They were created somewhere between 3300 and 2300 BCE, and each one is a perfectly shaped tube made from nephrite jade, a stone so hard that it ranks about 6 or 7 on the Mohs scale. That is tougher than steel. And yet the Liangzhu carvers managed to turn it into perfect right angles and even add parallel lines. Archaeologists say that the only way they could have done it was by rubbing sand against the jade for weeks or even months at a time. 4. The Ebers Papyrus. Ancient medicine wasn't just chants and leeches, although it had plenty of that too. The Ebers Papyrus has almost 900 different treatments for everything from eye infections to digestion issues. It even identifies the heart as the center of the system of vessels that carries blood and oxygen to the rest of your limbs. Its ancient Egyptian creators organized the list of different diseases by symptoms, listed ingredients, and even understood the basics of dosage, sometimes even warning against overdosing or combining the wrong medicines. For stomach pain, they prescribed mixtures of honey and herbs like mint or caraway. For burns, a paste of milk and resin. They also had remedies for asthma, like inhaling herbs that got heated on stones, and laxatives made from castor oil and figs. So, pretty much the kind of remedies you'd still find in a modern herbal guide today. 3. The Nebra Sky Disk. The Nebra Sky Disk was discovered by looters in 1999 near the German town of, well, Nebra. The looters also found swords, axes, and a few other Bronze Age treasures next to it and figured that it had all been buried together on purpose. When archaeologists finally saw it, they were sure it was fake, just because no one had ever seen anything like it. It was about 12 inches wide, made of bronze and decorated with gold inlays that show the sun, moon, and a tiny cluster of stars that matched the Pleiades. Recent testing found it was made through carefully timed heating and cooling during forging, with the gold inlaid in stages. The copper came from Austria's Alps, and the gold from Cornwall in the UK, which means whoever made it was part of a trade network that operated all across Europe. Today, UNESCO recognizes it as part of the memory of the world, and it sits proudly in the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle, Germany. 2. The Nabta Playa Stone Circle. In order to understand just how amazing Nabta Playa really was, you have to picture what that part of Egypt looked like 7,500 years ago. It was open grassland and seasonal lakes, and its people were what we'd call early herders and farmers. So for them, knowing when the rains would return ensured their survival. So they built a circle of standing stones that lined up with the summer solstice sunrise, something that would have taken them generations of observation, recording, and rebuilding to get right. Once again, people, this site is over 2,000 years older than Stonehenge, and not even on the same continent. The site was used for centuries until the climate dried up and the people moved north to be closer to the Nile. 1. The Göbekli Tepe complex. Okay guys, need I say more? Before the first ruins of Göbekli Tepe were unearthed in the 90s, everyone thought that humanity's first big monuments came from around 3000 BCE. You know, Sumer, Egypt, the pyramids. But this place was built thousands of years before that. And not by rulers or great kings, but by hunter-gatherers who carved, moved, and arranged all the different stones. Oh, and some of them weighed up to 10 tons each. The site is 11,000 years old, and frankly, it makes Stonehenge look tiny. It's about 10 times larger in scale than Stonehenge's main monument and older by millennia. The pillars were carved with a bunch of different animals. Once again, not always animals you'd find in the immediate area. They were arranged, stacked, and then, for a reason nobody yet knows, reburied deliberately. We've only exposed about 10% of the site so far, but it's genuinely rewriting human history the more we look into it. And that's a wrap. But now it's your turn. I want to hear from you. Which of today's entries taught you something you've never heard before? I mean, some of these discoveries really beg us to look a bit further than what mainstream archaeology has been teaching us, right? Or is that just me? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You truly make videos like this possible. And if you want to spend a little more time with me, I've got you covered. Our related video, 25 Ancient Asian Artifacts That'll Make You Rethink History, has a golden-coated eye from Iran's burnt city, a clay cylinder that might be the world's first Bill of Human Rights, and a star map drawn thousands of years before telescopes. That link will pop up right here. Click it. You'll love it. And I'll catch you guys next time.